Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
Oh, I'd say the magician. Yeah, because they're hard to cancel. I mean, unless they're opinionated about something that pisses a lot of people off.
Welcome to the Comedians and Elevators podcast. I've got my guest Mitchell Holden. Mitchell, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I can, yeah, I'm Mitchell Holden. I'm an actor. I write some. Um, yes, what else? Also, yeah, coach. That's kind of how we connected. I coach actors, which is something I've done in the past, more like word of mouth type of work, but now I'm relaunching into kind of a more structured, real like grown up business kind of thing. Um,
With an
so
LLC and everything, huh?
yeah, working that's this week actually. Yeah, and all the there's a really cool company called Go High Level where you can kind of put everything in one place and all kinds of assessments or whatever you need to add to it, plus payment structures, and it actually makes everything a little bit easier. Really brilliant, actually. Guy by the name of Robert, I started, I believe. Talked to a couple of times, but yeah, just that kind of thing, a little bit more business like, the art of business or business of art. Yeah.
The
Um,
art of business for sure. CRM is key. I would call it definitely more science though. But
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. It is more of a science. That's true. Yeah.
all right, so you ready to get started, Mitchell?
Sure.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comments section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build. And we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. All right, so the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So Mitchell, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
Yeah. Yeah. I believe so. The way you described it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so you ready for the first question?
Sure.
All right, so it's about the role of persona in comedy. So, how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
You mean in terms of what I prefer or,
Well, that's you could say, would you prefer? What do you mean personally?
um, well, I do. I mean, I like both. I mean, I love a really good comic actor playing a role or a part, or that's his persona that he's playing. I think a lot of them do anyway. They're different people when they're up on stage as opposed to, on the street meeting them. So I like both. I know I watched one of your podcasts. Guy talked about Jerry Lewis having this character that he developed, and that's what he used on stage. But as like a stand-up, like George Carlin or Gervais or somebody like that, um, it's just a difference. I think like George Carlin has something to say, not Jerry Lewis doesn't, but he just is a little bit more of a critic of this, social structure, political stuff, all that kind of thing, which I tend to
Right.
like that sort of being a brave comic like that, comedian or comic.
So then, does authenticity matter, or is illusion part of the magic?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think again, both. Thinking about you, I recently got kind of into Everybody Loves Raymond when it was out years ago. I was very critical of it. I thought it was mean spirited, and I was really judgmental. And but when you see I guess he'd be a comic and comedian. Ray Romano. He started out as a stand-up, but he developed into a pretty good actor. Over time. And I think watching that, I can see, here's a guy who did stand up who decided to take on this character, which is different than who he really is. To make comments about family and about, the brother relationship, marriage, all these really important, interesting things. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I was just fascinated by the idea of a comic and a comedian and an actor and taking on a role. And I think Ray Romano did that pretty well, and yet making comments on, what love is, and how to get along with your brother, that you had a certain way of feeling when you grew up, and here you are, and as adults trying to deal with this relationship. And it really, the funny thing is, it reminded me of Edward Albee for a lot of reasons, but just the absurdist quality of the show. It sort of took on that kind of role, I guess, and it was still grounded in reality. But the more I watched, the more I admired it, because I knew Albee fairly well, his work, and I could see some of that bleeding into it in the comedy itself. I don't know if my answering your question. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. Yeah,
Rambling on over
definitely.
here.
Well, we
Okay.
could shift gears. That might be an interesting way to go. So, how about punching up versus punching down?
Um,
So, where do comics versus comedians stand on this? And let me put it in some historical context. Did
sure.
a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be a lot of jealousy. I think I've never been a big fan of punching down, or even sort of ways of describing comics or actors, kind of putting them in a definition of art or comedy. I think if we get into that, we kind of get into trouble, um, because we're sort of, judging them as opposed to, like, well, what are they talking about? Is it important? Is he trying to make a point about something he or she that's going on in society right now? Um, and I was thinking about, like, Dave Chappelle got a lot of heat when he first started with the show, but he was making a statement about racism, and
Mhm.
very, very funny about it and interesting about it. But I thought important. The particular sketch I thought was really good was when he was blind, playing a black blind racist, and he was making such a great point by doing it. I remember he got a lot of heat for that, but I mean, it worked for what he was trying to say. Um, yeah, I guess going back to the jealousy thing, I mean, people were probably jealous of him because he was so good at it. Such a good
Right.
stand-up and a really good sketch artist, or sketch performer. So an actor as well, a comic and a comedian.
Absolutely. So then is the audience agreement with the comedian a form of permission or alignment?
Ooh, that's a really good question. You know, I mean, it can be both, but I think they do give permission, because if you laugh at it, he or she's kind of giving you permission to look at this subject, if it's absurd or whatever it might be, and give, in a way, if you laugh, you're giving permission. One thing it reminds me, when I've gone to stand-up shows, if I think it's funny, I laugh, but I have noticed that um, people wait to laugh, or instead of just, if it strikes them as funny, then you just laugh. But some people will hold back, or they're looking around at everybody else, as opposed to, well, what's your truthful reaction to what you just heard? Um,
Mhm. So how about love and justice? So is the highest function of comedy to expose injustice
hmm,
or to make people feel less alone while living with it?
wow. Uh, that's a really good question. I I think probably justice really hits me as an important part of what a great stand-up does. Um, what's the justice of it? And that's, especially now, it's really important because we have so much fighting between the left and the right, and it's ripping us apart in so many ways, right? As opposed to be able to sit down and work things out, as a functioning democracy is supposed to be all about. We seem to be pretty far from that right now. Um, but but I think that justice is a very important part of a great comic. I know this is old school, and I've heard some of your guests talk about George Carlin quite a bit.
Mhm.
But he was pretty fearless with that, and you knew you were going to get that if you ever watched him, right? That he was going to give you some justice.
Absolutely. So
Mhm.
then, when a joke harms someone unintentionally, does love demand accountability or does justice demand defiance?
Well, say that again. That's a pretty deep question, but it's good.
It is. It is. It's like the other one. So when a joke harms someone unintentionally,
Mhm.
does love demand accountability or does justice demand defiance?
Phew. Well, I think love, you said love requires accountability.
Yeah.
That's that I think that's probably these are such deep, interesting questions. But yeah, I think love is always maybe the first thing. And I know in any art, at least for me, it kind of starts with love, whether it's love of the work itself, love of the process of getting, if you're playing a character, uh, getting as close to that person as you can.
Mhm.
There is a lot of love in that, it kind of bases itself in the love of the work, a very important part of it. I think even the most cynical person, I don't think they'd be doing it if they didn't have some sort of at least like for what they're doing.
Absolutely. So, very important question. Advertising and self promotion. So,
Mhm.
who advertises themselves more, the comic, the comedian, or the You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast and get the message out today. See you soon.
Man, well, I I think the most impactful would probably be the magician in a sense because of what they do. They do grab, especially if they're good, they really grab your attention. They're fascinating. You're trying to figure out how they do it. Um, so I think maybe it's the most impactful just because of what they do. Um, yeah, but I think they all do it. I mean, you have to, right, nowadays to get an audience and keep working and get your point of view out there.
So then you don't see self promotion as selling out, or
No,
is it
oh,
necessary
I
for
see.
survival?
That's a really good question again. For me personally, it does feel like that sometimes because it's so relentless and you know, I'm from Northern California and I know a guy locally that he was a couple years younger than me, kind of grew up with him, but he's a really good voiceover guy, really, really good. And he's very good at marketing. And I think it's great because he's very talented. But when you see this kind of line between, people that are artists working, and then you have people kind of back home that aren't really a part of it, don't really know what you're going through. And I've seen people be critical with that kind of marketing, like, oh, they're always throwing their self out there and all that. But you kind of have to. It's always been a challenge for me because I don't like it, and I feel it's not a sellout, but it feels not phony, but just I guess it's necessary, but it's not
It
fun.
gives you the ick. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I mean, that's why people hire people to do it for them, to get to a point where they can make that happen. A lot of people have their own PR people and marketing people, and they just go, "Oh, please do that for me."
Right, because you have to detach from the present moment to execute the advertising. Is that perhaps one way to see it?
That's exactly what you have to do. You have to break your concentration or
Or
kind
break
of
character?
break character, right? To go do this marketing thing,
Right.
as opposed to just letting the work like a purist of
Speak for
letting the work speak for
right.
itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's some kind of format or technical aspect that's not is not there that you have to create.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Yeah, that's the part. You're right. That's a really good way to describe it. That's what it is. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. All right. So how about censorship and offense? So does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point, like a magician?
Hmm. Yeah, I think to prove a point. I think all great comics, right? The definition of the really good ones do have a point. They prove a
Mhm.
point, you know.
So then,
Yeah.
who survives better in the cancel culture environment? The
Oh,
comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger?
I'd say the magician. Yeah, because they're hard to cancel. I mean, unless they're opinionated about something that pisses a lot of people off,
Hmm.
uh, they're entertainers and they can kind of stick to that and the fascination of what they're doing, right? So yeah, I would think they
Yeah. Well, I mean, so if we put in the context of timing and delivery, is it a science or an art?
being a magician, you mean, or
Yeah.
it? You know, I would say it's both, but definitely a science, right? Um, I mean, there's so much that you have to do with your body, your hands, the process of just what they do physically, takes a lot of discipline, science of the mind, focus. Yeah, all the kind of mechanical things that they have to do really well to pull off what they do. But I guess the
Uh,
mystical part of it is more of an art.
the unknown. So, how
Yeah,
about
yeah.
comedy as commentary? So, when does a comedian cross into becoming a philosopher or a preacher?
When they do that,
Yeah.
um, wow. I guess if you go way back, people like Mark Twain, you know,
Okay.
did that. I mean, they have that award they give every year, um, in his name. So he's
Yeah.
probably the best example of that. Yeah.
All right.
And
So,
Ricky
is that,
Gervais reminds me of that as well. Because he'll comment about the people that he knows and people he works with, and you know,
yeah, he's name dropping all these people and then he talks smack about them,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, he just sort of goes after it, and yeah, kind of like the everyday man in the middle of it,
Mhm.
you know.
Speaking of every day, so Mitchell, you ready to enter the multiverse?
The what? I'm sorry.
The multiverse.
Okay, all right.
All right. Board game, Zoomcast, play versus performance. So you
Mm.
have to choose an avatar. If comedy were a board game Zoomcast, are you competing as the colorist avatar, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the
Mm.
Foley artist avatar, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
Mm. Another really good question. I I think maybe the second one being, a storyteller and actor, probably answer B would
Okay.
uh would be more my speed, just, having to tell a story and make it poignant. You really have to work to find out, what the action is, what you want. What are you going to do if you don't get what you want? There's just so much to it, so much specificity to it.
Right. So then, does comedy work better when it's painted vividly or when it's orchestrated sonically?
Mm. Well, another really good question. Well, I do like the idea of painted vividly. Maybe I'm, answering both questions in different ways, but painted vividly is more memorable, more impactful because you remember visual much more, I think, than you necessarily do with what you hear. But visuals really stick with you, Even when you're
Hmm.
talking to people, you might be in the middle of a sentence and somebody reminds you of your dad, and your dad will flash in your mind's eye while you're talking to somebody. Everything is very, very visual. I mean, you do that in acting too, you have visuals of you're arguing, you have a scene where you're arguing with your dad, you might have a visual of when you were a kid and your dad smacked you or whatever that, you know, memory that you've put in there that helps you to kind of get to what that character wants. So yeah, I'm a really visual person too.
All right. So, here in the Comedians in Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And the previous guest was Cal Kalozwiski. I'm
Mm.
butchering his name, I know. He asks if you only had one comic or comedian to see, what type would you want to see, the comic or the comedian, and why?
Mm. Um, I may have to ask you to define the two one more time. Just I think I
Well,
got it, but
I mean, I would say the comic is external and the comedian is internal.
okay. Um, man, I would say external. I know that I think it takes more a very, 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 very brave person to be external, right? And then
Do
put
you
it all out
know?
there.
Can you identify a comic that would personify this?
I, I, well, I guess Dave Chappelle, because he does sketch so well, right? So he does characters and he does straight on stand up.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, you know. Gervais right up there too, because I like I appreciate his, not always agree with him, but he's pretty brave, man. You know,
Yeah,
he
if you
kind of
make
comes across a
friends
guy
just
that
to talk
just doesn't
smack,
care. What's
right?
that?
Yeah, if I started telling jokes about you, Mitchell, I
Yeah,
met this guy and I just started making up stories that never happened,
yeah,
and you'd be like, "What the hell is this guy doing?"
yeah. Good
I'm saying
point.
I do that, but you do make me think about it.
Yeah, no, it's a good point actually. Yeah, yeah.
All right, fair enough. I won't do it. I won't do it. I promise. All right, so last question: legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics Tight Five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Hmm. I think the comedian's cultural point of view tends to be more timeless. I've watched a few of your shows, and so many people go back to George Carlin. A lot of people don't even know who he is, right? But there's people on all generations that remember him, and for
Mhm.
specific monologues that he had, right? So I think that's probably the most timeless. Um, when you go back and listen to because it's his stuff is timeless in a sense, right? We're always dealing with a lot of the same things,
Mhm.
and he's pertinent for today in a lot of places, right? And a lot of things that he talked about anyway. And he's funny. He could be very funny. He could get really
No,
angry at times, but he could also be very, very funny too.
yeah,
You know.
yeah, exactly. So awesome. So Mitchell, where can everybody find you online?
Uh, Well, right now I'm on Instagram. Just kind of search Mitch Holden. You'll find me. As I've said before, I'm kind of relaunching everything, so I have a spacer for my website and that sort of thing. But everything's I'm right now it's set for March 15th. We're kind of on track, but like I said, I want everything to kind of I don't want to just throw it out there and not be ready for people because if I am lucky enough, blessed enough to get clients, I want to say, okay, I'm ready for you, and not have to say, well, this technical thing, I still have to work on that, and I have that. Not that you can be perfect, but just I want to serve them well, and hopefully I have a lot to offer. We'll find out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Mitchell, thank you for being my guest, and for everyone, please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you. Thanks.
If you're interested in too much information like in the network state or Mantipus the chicken shit, check out this video. Or is it this one right here? Well, either way. Lizard.